It's been an exciting few weeks for us without getting any content out, and in today's video, we'll catch you up on everything that we've been up to. We've broken down tanks, bought new tanks, and both completely revamped our fish rooms, and we can't wait to share the process. We hope you enjoy today's video. It's been about a month since we got our last video out, but we promise it's been for good reason. Will and I have both been incredibly busy at work and preparing for the holidays, but that hasn't stopped us from making tons of changes in our fish rooms. Unfortunately, our local fish store, Nova Tropicals, is shutting down at the end of the month, making the closest local fish store to us London Town Tropicals, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive. We want to shout out the staff at Nova for their years of shared knowledge and superior customer support. So thank you Dave, Noah, Kathy, and Shane for all you've done for us over the last 2 years. There was something positive with its closing though. Dave, the owner, was thoughtful enough to give both Will and I 2 incredible deals on a 210-gallon setup for me and a 150-gallon setup for Will. With both of our fish getting to their full sizes, it couldn't have come at a better time. With Christmas being around the corner, my family thought it'd be a good idea to all pitch in and decided that the 210 would be the perfect Christmas present. So they decided to get it for me a few weeks early. Will has wanted to replace his 125-gallon Severum setup for a little while now, knowing that as they grow, they're definitely going to need more space. So the weekend following Thanksgiving, Will, my brother-in-law Mike, and I went down to Nova and picked up both of our new tanks. We used Will's truck to load both stands and aquariums and headed straight to Will's to help him get it into his basement. Then we headed to my house to do the same. I'm sure you all can imagine that both of us wanted to set these things up immediately, but we both wanted to be very deliberate about the stocking that we wanted in each tank. For me, I tossed around the idea of trying to get some of the Central American cichlids that I've kept as wet pets into the 210 to see how that might work out. I seriously contemplated putting my Trimac, my Parachromis loazelli, one of my 2 red tiger motas, and all of the Central American fish in my 125 combined in the 210. But having waited to get the Trimac for as long as I did, I just couldn't bring myself to commit to that setup. So Will and I talked at length about what some of our options might be, and we decided to swap a few fish to complete both of our aquariums. We decided to remove the 2 red tiger Severums from his 125 and replace them with the True Parrot and the Gold Som from my aquarium, adding in the Chili Red Oscar, making both his new 150 and my 210 all South American setups. So let's head over to Will's so he can take us through some of the changes he's made, some of the fish he's got future plans for, and part of the process he took in setting up his new 150-gallon aquarium. And be sure to stick around because we're going to come right back here and do the same with my 210. Over to you, Will.
How's everybody doing? This is Will from Sick Psyche, and we have a lot of changes going on in my fish room. Today, I'm removing my 125-gallon Severum tank and replacing it with a brand new 150-gallon tank. Originally, I was going to move all the fish that were in the 125 to the new 150, but that has changed. Mike and I talked about making the 150-gallon a Parachromis tank only, but we ended up moving away from that and decided on a South American only tank setup. So as Mike mentioned a little earlier, since our local fish store is closing down, we were able to get great deals on new tanks and lids and substrate. Once we picked up the tanks, I decided that I was going to go ahead and paint all 3 sides of the tank black and get this done before moving it in place. I used 3 coats of black paint before I was satisfied with the way it looked. After letting it completely dry, I decided to take my new driftwood that I got and do a fitment check. So it ended up being a perfect fit, and boy was I glad. So now that I knew the tank was painted the way I wanted, driftwood would fit, I gave Mike a call, asked him when the next time he's coming by, that way I'd have a hand moving the tank in. So before he got here, I went ahead and started the draining process on the 125 and got the fish moved out of the tank into a holding tub, put my air stones in there so the fish will be comfortable and well oxygenated. And once Mike got there, we started the process of moving the tanks. So after the tanks were moved, we decided to go ahead and move the fish that Mike brought with him into the holding tank so they can get acclimated. And he got 2 of the Tiger Severums so he could take back to his house to his 210 gallon tank setup. After this, I began the process of setting up my tank. I started by adding 5 25-pound bags of Stony River Premium Aquarium substrate. And for this setup, I went to white, I like to call it beige, colored sand. After adding the sand, I started filling the tank with water, and while the tank was filling, I worked on the filters. Originally, my plan was to use the FX4 that was on the 125 gallon tank originally, but after opening it up, I decided to go ahead and just start fresh with the FX6 that I had purchased because the FX4 had a snail infestation inside the filter that I didn't even know about. So because of the snail infestation, I ended up taking all of the biomedia out of the FX4, cleaned it in tank water, cleaned it real good, and I put it all in the brand new FX6 along with brand new matrix out of the box into the FX6 so I could fill all of the canisters up. Once I was done with the filter, I went ahead and placed it on the tank. For this setup, I went with my intake on the far right corner and my return valve, my outtake return valve in the middle facing to the left. And I did this because I knew I was putting my wave maker in the middle on the right hand side, and I was going to be able to get a good circulation, bringing everything back to my intake for the filter. Once I finished with the FX6, I went ahead and set up my Tidal 110 on this tank. My Tidal 110 is going to have all of my chemical filtration, which for me, I use the ChemiPure Blue in all of my tanks. And once I finished this and I was happy with everything, I moved on with the process of working on my driftwood. For this tank, I pulled the driftwood back out since it was already bolted to a piece of slate. I drilled holes into the actual slate and installed fake plants through the holes. And that way, I did it that way so that way when I put the driftwood back in and put the sand over it, it was gonna look like there were real plants coming out of the sand. Now, for some reason, I decided to start filling my tank prior to setting the driftwood up and putting it in there. This is not something I would recommend. I would always say, determine how you want to put your driftwood in the tank and everything, then add water. So for me, I struggled a little bit getting the driftwood in because it decided it wanted to float. So I ended up taking 2 other pieces of rock that I had and put over the slate part on top of the sand. That way it would hold it in place. And luckily for me, I only needed 2 pieces of rock and it worked great. So at this point, my tank was set up the way I wanted. So I went ahead and dosed it with Seachem Prime. And I also dosed it with Seachem Stability since this was a brand new tank setup. I usually only add stability when I do a brand new tank. And in this case, since it was new, I added it. So after dosing the tank, I went ahead and added the heater for this, and I used the Aqua double tubes quartz aquarium heater. It's 800 watt for tank size up to 200 gallons. So I use this because it has the protective covering over the heater. That way my fish are protected. I don't have to worry about any of them getting burnt. It also has a digital display that I can adjust the temperatures that I want to set it at, but it also shows me the temperature my tank is currently running at. So I always know the water I'm putting into it, if I got it close to, or the setting just right for when I'm adding more water into my tank doing water changes. For lighting on this tank, I went with the Night Crew Classic LED Plus programmable aquarium lights with timer. Mike put me onto these timers, onto these lights a little while ago, and now 3 of the 4 tanks in my fish room have that, with the 4th one coming soon. So I like these lights because you have the ability to adjust the light settings to your liking. You can adjust all the different LEDs in there. There's also set your timer for when you want it to automatically come on, automatically go off. This works great since I travel a lot, and a lot of time if I'm not home, my wife may not come downstairs, so it allows me to be able to give them some moments of light during the day without being in darkness the whole time I'm gone traveling. So once I had the lights programmed, I programmed it to the same settings as my other 2 tanks that have these lights. Got it all set up and ready. I decided to go ahead and let the tank sit and cycle for about a good hour before I added the fish in. And after that hour, it was time to add the fish to their forever home. I must say that I was super excited about this because I was ready to see how the fish were gonna look in their new tank with the new setup and everything. So in this tank, I have 1 true parrot cichlid, I have one gold psalm out of green terror and one red Oscar. All these three fish came from Mike's house, so we added them to the tank. And what are the fish that I took from my 125? I put in 3 red shoulder severums, 1 blood parrot, 2 geophagus spini, 3 waru, 1 gold severum, 2 electric blue acaras, 2 cories, and 2 clown loaches. So once all the fish were in there and I was happy with them being in there, made sure nobody was immediately stressed out, I turned off all the lights and I let them sit and settle for about a good hour and a half, 2 hours. And you know, when I came back down to check them out, they were all swimming around nicely. So far I have no aggression in the tank, but as always, I'm gonna keep a close eye, because with the Oscar, some of the fish, if it can fit in their mouth, it will chase it. And with me having the cories in there, the clown loaches, and they're smaller, I'm just gonna keep a close eye on it for the next couple of days. Now we're gonna go back over to Mike's house and check out his 210.
Thanks, Will. But before we can get to the 210, I've got to tell you everything that had to happen to get there. And it started with my 210-gallon peacock and hap tank. This time last year was our introduction to YouTube. And to start, we were lucky enough to have the Cichlid Bros come out and tour our fish rooms. In that visit, Alec asked me if my 210-gallon African cichlid tank was my favorite.
Is it your favorite tank?
So I would say it's my favorite tank, but the African cichlid is not my favorite fish.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah. And my response to him was that it may not be my favorite cichlid, but it was by far my favorite tank. To me, it's like art in motion, and I can get lost in this aquarium for hours. But they weren't my favorite cichlids. From the very beginning, I have loved South and Central American cichlids. It's something about each fish I've owned that for me, they just seem more personable, which is probably one of the reasons that I keep so many as wet pets. The other reason? Aggression. But I really wanted to have either a 210-gallon Central American or South American setup that was as enjoyable as my peacock and hap tank. So Will and I sat down and talked stocking for both his new 150 and my 210. There were only 2 fish that I knew were 100% going into the 210. My very first Oscar, De La Hoya, and this flagtail that I've grown out my bedroom 75 for the past 7 months. Will's very first Gold Psalm Green Terror passed a few months ago, and because I have this true Green Terror, we figured that the female in my 125 would go to Will. In looking at his stocking, with a few Warus and various Severums, we knew that the true parrot would also probably fit in his community. For me, I needed something that would pair nicely with the Oscar, and we knew that a proven tank mate is the Severum, and the Red Tiger Severum seemed like it'd be a great pairing. So now that we'd settled on the stocking, it was time to build the aquarium. And let me tell you, for me, it was a process. The very first thing I did after I brought the 210 home was perform a leak test on the aquarium. I filled the tank all the way to the top and monitored it for 24 hours to ensure that it had no leaks. Then I drained the tank and started to paint the background. I used the same paint that I've used on all of my other aquariums, which is the Krylon Indoor-Outdoor Flat Black Acrylic Paint. I applied 3 coats to each side of the aquarium. With the placement of this aquarium, I don't need to view it from its sides, providing a true gallery look when viewing the tank. Then, I had to break down and move several aquariums. First, the 2 40-gallon breeders, housing my community fish, then the 55-gallon in the military room, and finally, this 60-gallon, housing my albino tiger Oscar and a Parachromis loazelli, placing them into 2 different 40-gallon tufts. I then removed all of the decor and equipment, allowing me to empty each aquarium substrate. I did this for a couple reasons. 1, I wanted to save as much beneficial bacteria as possible, and 2, the Estes Premium Aquarium sand that I love is not easy to find anymore. It's a much heavier and durable sand than most, comparable to Carib Sea Gold, and I loved it so much in my 55 and 60 that I wanted it in my 210. Then I used a shop vac and vacuumed each tank, filled them with water, and dosed them with the chlorinator. I put back all of the equipment, allowing me to place all of the displaced fish back into the aquariums. And with the substrate already in the 210, it was time to start installing the equipment and aquascaping. I started with this piece of driftwood that I envisioned being the centerpiece. Using a cement drill bit, I drilled a hole in a piece of slate rock, and with a 3 1/4 inch screw, drilled the driftwood to the rock. I also drilled a few holes into the driftwood, allowing me to tightly fit these fake plants into the wood. I repeated this process with the other 2 pieces of drift decor and felt confident about my vision. I knew that, like my African cichlid tank, I wanted to keep a low profile of decor and maximize the amount of swim space for the fish. I personally also like when the fish, not the decor, is the star of the aquarium. So I decided to use a few pieces of decor that would also serve as deterrents for cichlids like geos that sift and dig in sand. With the scape complete, filtration was next. For this aquarium, I decided to use one FX6, one FX4, and one Seachem Tidal hang-on back. The placement of each filter is intentional. I placed the FX6 on the same side of the wave maker with the intake closest to the wall. The output is about 1 foot from the wave maker facing the same direction. It's set up this way for the direction of the current and where most detritus and uneaten food would collect. The Seachem Tidal is centered on the tank and solely used for chemical and fine filtration. Having it set up this way allows easy access to both, as they require the most frequent changes. This is nice when using canisters as primary filtration because it limits how much you have to open them. And on the far right of the tank is the FX4, housing plenty of beneficial bacteria and serving as an alternate source of filtration should the FX6 ever go down. Its intake is on the right side and outputs facing the same direction as the wave maker, adding to the gallons per hour being moved. The wave maker used on this aquarium is the Unicliff, made for 120 to 300 gallon aquariums, and moves 3,400 gallons per hour. For surface agitation, exactly like my 210 Peacock and Hap aquarium, I rely on 2 large air discs that provide plenty of oxygen. A lot of people don't like the bubbles in the tank look, but the way that I've got these tanks set up, I'm able to conceal the bubbles with lighting. The lighting that I use on this tank is exactly like my African cichlid aquarium, the Fluval Planet 3.0 lights, set with the exact same settings. I've experimented with a few different lights, from Aqueon to Night Crew to the Aqua Sky, and maybe in the future I'll try something like the AI Prime or Kessel's, but for now, the Fluval are my favorite. To heat the aquarium, Will and I both agree that the Akka submersible heaters are our favorite, and on this tank I chose the 1200 watt heater. And finally, it was time to add the fish. The stocking isn't yet complete, as I still have a few fish that I plan on adding, but for now, these 3 Geophagus redhead tapajos, 3 Geophagus alabios, 2 red tiger severums, 1 flagtail, 1 Mesoheros ornatus, and Oscar de la Hoya, they'll do just fine. They adapted instantly with no aggression in the tank, and for me, it was everything I dreamed of. Please tell me what you think in the comment section below, and if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears. Well, that does it for today's video. We haven't forgotten about our last 2 top 22 videos either, and they'll be coming out shortly. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and until next time, be safe.